A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. We start with verse 32 of Surah Yusuf. It says, "She said, 'Well, this is he about whom you blamed me. No doubt I seduced him, but he escaped. If he doesn't do what I say, he will certainly be thrown into prison and disgraced.'" Now, Zulekha speaks up that now you understand why I was after this man. After waiting patiently for this time to come, the wife of Aziz finally speaks out that this is what you were blaming me for. She tries to prove herself right by saying that you have seen him once and I see him day in and day out for years. You couldn't control yourself for 1 minute. How do you expect me to control myself? Now just look at her level of lust. She does not say you misunderstood. She says, yes, I was tempted and I wanted him and I seduced him. And she tries to justify what she did. And as we know, that finding logic and justification for your sin is a satanic trait. And instead of, admitting her weakness of character, she tries to shift the blame on the good looks of Yusuf alayhi salam. She is saying these things because she has the political power to say things which an ordinary woman in her place could not have said. And after this, she became so shamelessly bold that she says that if he does not agree to what I command, he would be thrown into prison. Now, this also reveals the reality of her so-called love. All that she wants is his body. And in case she fails, she is ready to inflict pain and torture upon him. So this is something far away from love. This is plain lust. You see, the point is that taqwa or fear of Allah is the only power that can control human behavior. Otherwise, the animal instincts dominate. The basic passions become so wild that they overrule any rationality. And what was wrong with her? That she was deprived of fear. She had no fear. That is why the Prophet ﷺ said, the gist of which is that Iman and Haya coexist. If one is there, the other is there too. And if one leaves, the other leaves too. Verse 33. Yusuf said, "O my Rabb, I would rather go to prison than that to which they invite me, and unless you ward off their cunning snare for me, I may in my youthful folly feel inclined towards them and become one of the ignorant." Now scholars say that this verse shows that now it was not just the wife of Aziz who desired Yusuf alayhi salam, but it was the whole assembly of women who were drooling over him. And indeed, this was a very complex, a very difficult situation for Yusuf alayhi salam to deal with. He is in a big fix now, and he addresses no one other than Allah. He connects to Allah, and this fact is, or this trait is a mark of a believer, that good times or bad times, the first link, the first connection is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says that he would prefer the prison over what these women are inviting him to. He says the prison is better. How come the prison is better? Here he is living in a place where life is so glamorous, where he is admired, where he is wanted. He has everything at hand which a young man of his age could fancy. And there is this prison with all its gloominess, with its harshness, a place where no one would ever want to go, even for a single day. But he says it is better. Why? Because this is the vision of a moment. He looks at everything and every aspect of life with the akhirah in mind, with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in mind. This life that was being offered to him, no matter how glamorous it was, would end up in the fires of hell, and the life of the prison, no matter how hard it is, will take him to Jannah. So he hasn't made a wrong choice. He, in one verse, he is just one person versus them all. And he is a slave, yet he stands up for what he believes to be right. And this can only be done on the basis of strong iman. Now, what do people generally do? That they give in to what everyone believes. And this is what we call the pressure of society or the peer pressure. We have to live like everyone wants us to live. We will do things the way it is acceptable to people. And shunning off responsibility from your own shoulders that, what can I do? Everyone is doing it. I can't go against the society. The fact is that in Islam, majority is not the authority. Only Allah is the authority. If Allah has forbidden something, if Allah has made something haram, that's the end of the story. No ifs and no buts. No loopholes to do it. Yusuf alayhi salam doesn't say that I'm only a slave. I have no choice of my own. I have to please and serve the household that I live in. I have nowhere else to go. And I'll explain to Allah that I was forced, I was compelled. I had simply no way out. Now this shows that if you truly desire, Allah does make a way out for you. Yusuf alayhi salam makes a spontaneous, what we call a split-second decision that, okay, thank you very much. I opt for the prison rather than what you invite me to. And what we see striking in his reaction is that after showing such a strong control and command of human weaknesses, he's not showing any complacency, no arrogance. And we see that he's again connecting to Allah with humility, that Allah, it's only you who will protect me and give me the strength to stand up against evil. I am nothing on my own. And if you do not come to my aid, you do not come to my help, I would be from the ignorant. And who are the Jahileen referred to in this verse? These are educated women belonging to the elite, wives of ministers. You see, in Islam, Jahil is not the one who is uneducated. Jahil is the one who is living a life of heedlessness. He has no consciousness of Allah. He doesn't care what pleases or what angers Allah. And above all, these are all married women. Any religion, any code of ethics would not approve of their behavior. But this must have been the in thing in that society. Extramarital relationships. And unfortunately, we find that this very trend is popular in most so-called advanced nations, and this is something that is grasping firm roots in our society too. May Allah save us from such mishappenings. Verse 34, thereupon his Rabb granted his prayer and warded off their cunning snare from him. Surely he hears all and knows all. Now the verse teaches us something very important, and that is that no person, no matter how pious, how upright he is, he does not have the power to take himself out of any evil without the help of Allah. Now what does the verse say? Allah warded off their cunning snare from him. So if a prophet, the most pious and innocent beings on earth, cannot repel evil without the help of Allah, then at what place are puny creatures like us? When such great people make no claims of their purity, how can we have the audacity to say that, my vision is pure, my nazar is pak, my heart is pure, my niyyah is clear, I have no inclination to sin? No, we have to realize and admit that whatever sin is not in our inclination is not our merit, but a special favor and mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Yusuf alayhi salam chooses prison over the life he was being offered at the house of Aziz. And he also knew from the last episode that the Aziz was a weak man and he had no control over his wife. She could just get away with anything she wanted, and now he is at least safe from the cunning traps which were being laid out for him time and again. And the Prophet ﷺ said, the gist of which is that this world is like a prison for the moment. Verse 35, still even after the evidence they had seen, they thought it proper to send him to prison for a while. Now this whole case is going out of hand now, and it needs to be decided once and for all. So the Aziz of Egypt went into mutual consultation with his associates and wife, and they decided that now the best policy would be to send Yusuf alayhi salam to prison for some time. Now again look at his weak and shallow nature, that he has seen with his own eyes, and he has seen the proofs and evidences. He as well as all his associates know well what is happening. They know who the culprit is, and this is the second time now. He had expected his wife the first time, and this time she is bolder than before. The first time she tried to shift the blame on Yusuf alayhi salam, but the second time she has not even a fraction of haya left. She shamelessly admits before a huge gathering that yes, I am the one who wants, and it was me who tried to seduce him. So if there was even a fraction of ambiguity left the first time, it was all too clear now the second time. And still the Aziz tries to protect her. He still tries to cover her up, who has simply no regard for his honor or his position. If a weak person is given power, he uses it in the wrong direction, like the Aziz, who used his authority and power on the most innocent person who is in a weaker position worldly wise, but as far as human beings are concerned, he has no one to defend him or to speak up for him. He is in such a weak position. No one have this moral courage in the whole administration. And so Yusuf alayhi salam is sent to the prison. And just look at Yusuf alayhi salam. Just look at his love for Allah. It is such that he is ready to undergo any hardship, any trial, whether physical or emotional. If you look at the emotional pains he's going through, prison is what? A prison is a place which is a mark or a symbol of shame. It is a symbol of humiliation. This is enough to scar and mar a person's reputation. Then secondly, when you are guilty and actually do something bad and people talk about you, you don't feel that much pain. But when you have not done anything wrong at all, never even, thought of it, and you become the talk of the town for it, then this is extremely painful, and such things are commonly said. There must be something. There is no smoke without fire. Or like they say in our language, कि ताली दोनों हाथों से बजती है, meaning that in anything that happens, more or less, both the individuals are involved. So Yusuf alayhi salam had to bear this pain too. Then if you look at the physical aspect, Yusuf alayhi salam had been living up till so far in a clean environment of home. A prison is a place which is hygienically unfit. He had to live in this filthy environment now. The food is awful and hard physical labor is taken from the prisoners. And the colleagues that are with you 24 hours are mentally sick criminals. They are not civil people which are easy to get along. And even one such person is enough to drive you nuts. And another factor is that no time limit has been given for his imprisonment. He doesn't know for how long he's there. A few years of his whole life. He doesn't know for how long he has to live in this disgusting place and what will become of him when he comes out. If we look at it from a worldly perspective, this situation is more than enough to put an ordinary person into a fit of depression. But Yusuf alayhi salam finds all this more acceptable and desirable than disobeying Allah. Such is the vision of a true mu'min. We see not a word of complaint or resistance from him. Verse 35. Still, even after the evidence they had seen, they thought it proper to send him to prison for a while. So Yusuf alayhi salam has to go to the prison despite being innocent, because he has no one influential to speak up for him. And these women, they belong to such a class that no one can lay a finger on them. So it is Yusuf alayhi salam against these elite women, and he has to be thrown into the prison, and it is no problem for them. Verse 36. 2 young men also entered the prison along with him. One day one of them said, I saw a dream that I was pressing wine. The other said, I saw in a dream that I was carrying bread on my head, of which birds were eating. Tell us the interpretation of these dreams, for we see that you are a man of virtue. Now 2 lads entered the prison along with Yusuf alayhi salam. They say that these 2 lads had been shifted to this prison from the king's prison. One was the bread maker for the king and the other was a winemaker. And both of them were charged with the attempt of assassinating the king. Now, as we know that Yusuf alayhi salam is not like ordinary people. He doesn't just sit there and sulk that, what is happening in my life and what have I done that I have come here. And what am I going to do now? He makes the best out of what he is being offered. Nothing stops him from doing things that please Allah. He doesn't say that, what have people done to me all my life, so why should I be good to people? No, he does all the good he could manage. Scholars say that he was extremely merciful to the prisoners. He would serve to them. He would take care of the ones who were sick. He would share his food with those who wanted more, and did whatever good that was in his capacity to every one of them, each one of them. So even though he is in the prison, he outshines other prisoners. And everyone senses that there is something special about him. And he has this sort of an radiance that beamed out from his personality. Now these 2 lads also sense this, and they come up to him and ask for the interpretation of their dreams, and they presume that he would be able to interpret dreams. They did not know that he was actually blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this knowledge. And anyways, a dream is something very, very personal, and you cannot share it unless and until you completely trust a person in sincerity. And Yusuf alayhi salam had built that trust, that one of them comes up and says that I saw in a dream in which I saw myself squeezing wine, and the other one said that I saw a dream that I'm carrying bread on my head and birds are coming and eating that bread from my head. Verse 37. Yusuf replied, I will, with Allah's permission, tell you the interpretation of these dreams before you are served the food you eat. This is part of the knowledge which my Rabb taught me. In fact, I have forsaken the faith of those people who do not believe in Allah and even deny the hereafter. Now, we saw previously that Yusuf alayhi salam had come to the prison, and 2 young lads had entered the prison along with him. And these lads sense that there is something very, very special about Yusuf alayhi salam, and they both ask him to interpret their dreams. One of them says that I saw myself pressing wines. Obviously, he must have seen himself pressing grapes, and the net result was the outcome of wine. And the other said that he saw he was carrying bread on his head, and birds were eating that bread from there. Then we see that this verse and a few verses that follow, they are a masterpiece of dawah. And anyway, anyone who is interested in this work of dawah can extract gems of wisdom out of it. Now we find from this verse that the pagans were also familiar with this concept, that some dreams had a symbolic nature and they can be interpreted. Now Yusuf alayhi salam tells them that you will know about the interpretation of dreams before food is served. Now why does he say this? Because he wants to approach them in a very subtle way, and he is trying to put them to ease by saying that you will get what you want before food is served. Just be patient. So he gives them a time frame so that they don't get anxious. And as you know, if you think over it, food is served in prisons on regular timings, and if you miss that opportunity, then no one will wait for you. This is not your home, and up till the next meal time they would be left with no food to eat. So Yusuf alayhi salam is removing this anxiety that your dreams will be interpreted before that time, and this is being thoughtful on his part. He is sensing their concern, not that in his zeal to convey he becomes thoughtless of their concern. He doesn't say that you won't die if you won't have food one day. He's making grounds for what he is going to say, that I am going to be brief, I won't take much of your time. And this indeed is a wise technique in dawah. Brief, simple, and to the point speech is always more effective than long hours of sophisticated talk, and especially at the grassroots level. Now he is making this delay in interpretation because he wants to benefit them with something that is much more important than dreams and its interpretation. He wants to invite them to Islam. If you think of it, he is just a prisoner like other prisoners, and he is dealing right now with the worst of humanity. All of them are who? They are thieves, they are murderers, but he doesn't just sit back doing nothing. He becomes active. He does what he can. Whatever is in his capacity, whatever is in his capability. And this too is a mark of a moment. Now the problem with us is that when we see people doing great works of dawah and tabligh, we do appreciate them. And we also want to do it. But we feel that how can we do this work? We have not enough knowledge and we have no platform to work on. But if you look around, there must be someone to whom you can convey. And whatever knowledge you have, you can share it at some level. And in the meantime, you can increase your knowledge as well. A believer does good to the society whenever and wherever he can. And we see in the Islamic history that scholars like Imam Ahmad, Imam Taymiyyah, and many famous ulama, they were imprisoned. But even there, they continued to teach and preach. And sometimes it was seen that from within the prison, a generation of scholars was raised. And such is the way of a believer. A believer is never pessimistic, and there is always an opportunity to do good. You can always cause a chain, start a chain which can become the reason of a change. And even if you are in the prison, even if you are in the most unfavorable conditions. Now in this verse we come to know that Yusuf alayhi salam says that my Lord taught me the interpretation of dreams. See in what a subtle way he brings in the concept of his Lord. He changes the discourse the topic of dreams into religion. And this indeed is a profound way of dawah. This is a beautiful technique. The tip is that no matter what the topic, what the subject, it is directed back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, how did Yusuf alayhi salam change the topic from dreams to Allah? That if you guys are interested in getting your dreams interpreted, then you must also be interested in knowing that from where I learned this knowledge or this skill. And so I inform you that I got this knowledge from my Rabb. Then he goes on to introduce his Rabb. He says that I do not believe in the religion which does not believe in Allah and the hereafter. And as you know, that this was Egypt, where the prevailing religion constituted of idol worship. There was no one God, but multiple gods, one specific for one task alone. And there was no concept of life after death in this religion. You see, it is the difference of beliefs and concepts that segregates the believer from a non-believer. It is very easy to get along when concepts and beliefs are similar. But after all, what defines a believer is this difference and not the similarity. Nowadays, there is a movement in which only the similarities are dealt with, and they don't want to discuss the differences. And actually, it is very beneficial to highlight the similarities. When you highlight the similarities first, it facilitates dawah. But this does not mean that you leave and ignore the differences. These differences have to be made clear too, because it is the difference that has made you different from them and not the similarities. So Yusuf alayhi salam tells them that I am different from you because of these two reasons. Verse 38. I follow the faith of my forefathers Ibrahim, Ishaq and Yaqub. It is not fitting that we attribute any partner with Allah. It is the grace of Allah on us and on mankind. Yet most of the people are not grateful. Now in this verse, Yusuf alayhi salam answers a question which was bound to come in anyone's mind. That if he does not believe in their religion, then in whose religion does he believe in? He says that I believe in the religion of my forefathers, Ibrahim, Ishaq, and Yaqub alayhimus salam. He is proving his authenticity by mentioning the chain of prophets that were also his forefathers, who were his ancestors. In other words, he wants to tell them that whatever I believe in is not based on any other source, but on what the prophets of that time taught. And just notice how brief he is in his explanation. In just a few words, the whole foundation of his religion has been presented. Allah, Akhirah, prophethood. And if you look at it, this is a summary of deen. He teaches them that it is not befitting for us that we do shirk with Allah. What does he mean by this? If we look at the literal definition of shirk, it means to give the rights of Allah to someone other than Allah. So this means that if Allah is the being to be worshipped, then nothing can be worshipped besides him. His attributes cannot be attributed to anyone else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, in Surah Nisa, verse 48, that Allah will forgive any sin that he wants to forgive, but he will not forgive shirk. It is the most heinous of all sins. Then when he says, we prophets are not allowed to commit shirk with Allah. And then he adds that thus is the grace of Allah on us and on mankind. By this he means that the greatest blessing Allah has given us is the blessing to recognize our Creator as one as one worships him alone. And why is this fuzzle on mankind? Because the role models don't commit shirk. They have been taught and demonstrated that shirk is not allowed. The end of the verse says that most people don't realize this. Realize what? That only Allah is worthy of worship. You see, all religions that exist in this world believe in God, but the difference is that not even one of them believes in one God alone. Islam is unique in the sense that it believes in just one God. They think that Allah is inaccessible and cannot be approached directly, and they need intermediaries to approach him. Or God has given some of his attributes to different sources, so they too have the power to grant. And unfortunately, we see that some Muslims are also falling in the same folly. And this is indeed a very clever trap of shaitan, because he knows that by messing up people's beliefs, he can detract them to the extent that it leads them to the fires of hell. We Muslims are supposed to approach and worship Allah directly. Nothing is required between a slave and his creator. And realizing this reality and then being able to do so is the biggest blessing. If Allah has blessed you with this insight, you are lucky. And this matter is the essence of our deen. This is the primary and focal point of our deen. All other matters are secondary. So the true believers start with this point when they do dawah. Now just look at the vision of a moment that he's talking about shukr. The one who has gone through pain and sufferings and trials all his life and is still not out of them. He is still caught in one trial right now. What do people usually tend to do while being caught in a cycle of problems? They become resentful, they become bitter, they do have the thoughts of sabr, but shukr no way. Shukr is blocked, it's abandoned. And this way, a very pessimistic picture of Islam is presented. Look at Yusuf alayhi salam, who has been through nightmares in reality, yet saying that most people are not thankful to Allah. And this is another technique of dawah, making people optimistic, making them hopeful, making them at peace. Now there is this American revert by the name of Amina Salami. And after she embraced Islam, her life became a trial. To start with, her husband left her for accepting Islam. Then she lost her job. Then her daughter got married and the marriage resulted in a disaster. And finally she got cancer. And when various people interviewed her regarding her conversion, she seemed to be so happy, so content, so much at peace. And they asked her that how come you are so happy? Because if we look at you from a worldly perspective, you have nothing. You are a loser. You have all the reasons to be sulking and moaning. And she said that before Islam, I was a pretty little jeweled cup, but the cup was empty. And now that I have Islam, the cup is old and worn out, but it is brimming over with the love of Allah and with shukr. And this is what Yusuf alayhi salam wants to teach them. He is sitting in a jail at the moment with the criminals talking about shukr. Sabr and shukr go side by side. They are not, that when you cannot say that if you are doing sabr on a trial, you don't need to do shukr. They go side by side.